The funeral slideshow started without me in it. I'm Charlotte, and I was sitting in the third row of St. Matthew's Episcopal, watching 27 years of my father's life flash across a projection screen. There was Michael at his high school graduation, Michael at his wedding, Michael holding his first bonus check from Goldman Sachs, Michael. Not a single photo of me. Frederick was so proud of his family, the pastor was saying, gesturing toward the screen. Especially his son, Michael, who stayed close to home and carried on the family tradition of service to this community. I smoothed down the black dress I'd chosen specifically for today. It was the same one I'd worn 2 weeks ago when I photographed Dad in his hospital bed. That photo had just won the International Portrait Prize, though nobody here knew that. Nobody here knew much about me at all. "Charlotte, dear, you look thin," my aunt whispered, leaning over. "Are you eating enough in New York? I heard the photography thing isn't going well." I smiled politely and said nothing. The photography thing had netted me $2 million last year, but explaining that felt pointless. The slideshow continued. Michael's second wedding to Savannah, the blonde 27-year-old who collected designer handbags like trophies. Dad at Michael's lake house last summer, holding a beer and grinning. More Michael. Always more Michael. He was blessed with such a devoted son, Mum said from the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Michael never left us, never abandoned his family for some pipe dream. The words hit exactly where she intended. I'd heard variations of this speech for 8 years, ever since I'd moved to Manhattan with nothing but a camera and a studio apartment to the size of most people's closets. The slideshow ended with a photo of Dad and Michael fishing. No mention of the daughter who'd driven 12 hours straight to be here. No acknowledgement of the daughter who'd held his hand while he died. After the service, people clustered around Michael, shaking his hand and offering condolences. "You're the man of the family now?" Uncle Scott kept saying. "Your father would be so proud." I stood by the guest book, invisible as always, watching the performance. Savannah clung to Michael's arm, like a life preserver, occasionally glancing my way with curious eyes. "You must be Charlotte," she said when the crowd thinned. "I'm Savannah, Michael's wife. I've heard very little about you, actually." "That sounds about right," I said. She tilted her head. "What do you do in New York?" "Photography." "Oh, how fun. Like weddings?" Before I could answer, Mum appeared beside us. "Charlotte takes pictures of buildings and things," she said dismissively. "It's more of a hobby, really." Savannah looked confused. "But don't you need to work? I mean, New York is so expensive." "I manage," I said. Mum's expression tightened. "We should head to the house. There's something important to discuss." The family gathered in Dad's study an hour later. Michael sat in Dad's leather chair like he'd already inherited it. Mum perched on the edge of the desk. Uncle Scott leaned against the bookshelf. I took the folding chair someone had brought in from the kitchen. "Your father's will was very clear," Mum began, pulling out a manila envelope. "The lake cabin goes to Michael." I wasn't surprised. I'd expected this moment for years. What surprised me was how little I felt. "It makes sense," Michael said, not looking at me. "I'm the one who's here. I'm the one who'll use it." "Of course," Mum agreed. "Charlotte's never even visited the cabin. She doesn't understand what it means to this family." I'd visited the cabin exactly 17 times. I had photographs to prove it, but correcting them seemed pointless. "Any questions?" Mum asked, though her tone suggested questions weren't welcome. I shook my head. "No questions." Michael looked almost disappointed by my lack of reaction. "You're okay with this?" "I'm fine," I said. And I was. I was more than fine. That night I sat in my childhood bedroom, scrolling through my phone. 5 missed calls from Elisa, my business partner in New York. I'd call her back tomorrow. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labelled Family Archive. Hundreds of photos spanning 2 decades. Photos they'd never seen. Photos that told a different story than the slideshow at the funeral. I selected one. Mum at Christmas 2019, rolling her eyes while I showed Dad my gallery exhibition announcement. The caption I'd never shared read, "Stop making everything about you, Charlotte." I selected another. Michael at Thanksgiving 2018, laughing with Uncle Scott. The audio file attached captured him saying, "Charlotte doesn't count. She's not even here half the time." I had dozens more. Years of documentation. A complete archive of casual cruelty. My phone buzzed. Elisa again. "They gave him the cabin," I said when I answered. "Those bastards," she said immediately. "I'm so sorry, Char." "Don't be sorry," I said, closing the laptop. "They gave him the cabin." "But," I smiled for the first time all day. "But I just bought the lake." "You bought what now?" Elisa's voice crackled through my phone as I walked down Fifth Avenue. The entire lakefront estate next to the family cabin. 12 acres, private shoreline, boat access rights. I dodged a tourist taking selfies. "I close tomorrow." "Charlotte, that's insane." "How much?" 4.2 million. Silence. Then, "Jesus Christ, where did you get $4 million? I smiled. "Remember Zane? Your mysterious tech billionaire client? The one who paid us $500,000 for 3 months of brand consulting? That's the one. Turns out he's been watching my work for years. He wants to invest in something bigger." The truth was more complicated than that. Zane Sutton had first hired me 2 years ago to rebrand his AI startup. Most clients wanted glossy corporate headshots and sanitized company culture photos. Zane wanted something different. "Show me what's real," he'd said during our first meeting. "I'm tired of fake." So I'd photographed his team during actual work sessions. Frustrated developers debugging code at 2 a.m. The CEO having a breakdown in the supply closet. The moment they finally cracked their algorithm and everyone started crying. The campaign went viral. The startup sold for $800 million 6 months later. "You have a gift for seeing what people hide," Zane had told me afterward. "Most photographers capture what people want to show. You capture what they can't help revealing." That's when he'd proposed the partnership. A media platform focused on emotional truth branding. Companies tired of corporate BS, willing to pay premium rates for authentic storytelling. "We launched 6 months ago," I told Elisa, as I turned onto my street. "Remember all those mysterious clients I couldn't tell you about? The NDAs? You've been holding out on me. I've been building something, quietly, the way I always do." My phone buzzed with a text from Stuart, my lawyer. "Closing confirmed for 2 p.m. tomorrow. Shell company paperwork ready. They'll never see it coming." "Elisa, I need you to book a flight to Albany. We're going to need documentation." "Documentation of what?" "Everything. I want cameras rolling when they find out." The next morning, I met Stuart at his office in downtown Albany. He was exactly what I'd hoped for when I'd researched estate lawyers in the region. Ruthless, expensive, and completely uninterested in family drama. The previous owners were motivated sellers, he said, sliding papers across his desk. Apparently, they'd been trying to unload the property for 2 years. Something about maintenance costs. I signed document after document. Warren Studio Estates, LLC. A shell company that would take weeks to trace back to me, if anyone bothered trying. "The shoreline access rights were the tricky part," Stuart continued. "But your family's cabin sits on a landlocked parcel. Legally, they need easement access to reach the water. Access that now runs through your property. And I can revoke that access? At any time, for any reason." He smiled. "Or no reason at all." I walked out of that office, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I held power over something my family wanted. My phone rang as I drove back toward the city. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Charlotte, I wanted to check on you. Yesterday was hard on everyone." "I'm fine." "Good. Listen, we're planning the Memorial Day gathering at the cabin. Same as always. You should come." I almost laughed. "Should I?" "It would mean a lot to Mum. And to me. We're family, you know." "Are we?" Silence. Then, "Of course we are. Look, I know you're upset about the will, but Dad made his choice. The cabin needs someone who'll actually use it. You're right, I said. It does. So you'll come? I'll be there. After I hung up, I called Elisa back. Change of plans. Book 2 flights to Albany and bring the good cameras. What's happening Memorial Day weekend? A family reunion. The first one, where I'm actually invited. Invited by who? I pulled into my parking garage, already planning the shot list in my head. By the new owner of the lake. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by contact sheets and proof prints. My walls were covered with photographs most people would never see. The real moments, the unguarded expressions, the truth that lived in the spaces between smiles. I pulled out a photo from last Christmas. Michael raising a toast while I sat at the kids' table, literally pushed to the side to make room for Savannah. In the background, barely visible, Mum was removing my place setting. I'd titled it, Making Room. Tomorrow, I'd start making room of my own. My phone buzzed with an email. The subject line read, Memorial Day weekend. Can't wait to meet you? It was from Savannah. The message was brief. Michael told me you're coming to the lake house. I'm so excited to finally meet his mysterious sister. I've heard, well, very little actually, but I'd love to get to know you better. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Elisa with a single word. Perfect. The security guard's name was Marcus, and he was exactly 6'4". I'd hired him specifically for his presence. Former military, calm demeanour, the kind of guy who could deliver bad news without raising his voice. He stood beside the 10-foot chrome gate I'd had installed across the shoreline access road, clipboard in hand, looking official. Mum, this is private property, I heard him say, as Michael's Range Rover pulled up to the gate. I'm going to need to see authorization. I was positioned on the hill above, hidden behind a cluster of pine trees with Elisa and her camera equipment. We had a perfect view of the boat ramp, where my family had launched their pontoon boat every Memorial Day for the past 15 years. Authorization for what? Michael's voice carried up the hill. This is our access road. We own the cabin right there. I understand, sir, but the shoreline access runs through Warren Studio Estates property. Without written permission from the owner, I can't allow vehicles or watercraft through. Mum's voice, shrill with indignation. This is ridiculous. We've been using this ramp for decades. I'm sorry, Mum. Property rights changed hands recently. New owner, new rules. I watched Michael get out of the car, followed by Savannah, in a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Mum emerged from the passenger seat wearing her "I'd like to speak to the manager" expression. Who owns this property? Michael demanded. I want to speak to them immediately. The owner isn't available, sir. But I can give you the contact information for the property management company. Marcus handed Michael a business card. I'd had them printed yesterday. Warren Studio Estates, LLC. The phone number went straight to Stuart's office. This is insane, Savannah said, looking around at the gate, the security guard, the professionally installed signage. Who just buys lakefront property and blocks access? Someone with money and a grudge, Mum said. This has to be illegal. Actually, Mum, it's completely legal. The previous owners sold all shoreline rights with the property. Your cabin sits on a landlocked parcel. I watched Michael's face change as the implications hit him. No lake access meant no boating, no swimming, no dock, no waterfront activities. The cabin was essentially worthless as a vacation property. There has to be an easement, he said. Some kind of grandfather clause. Not according to the county records, sir. Would you like me to call the sheriff's office to verify? Yes, Mum snapped. Call them right now. Marcus pulled out his radio with practiced efficiency. Dispatch. This is Marcus at Warren Studio Estates. I have a property access dispute that may require law enforcement assistance. The radio crackled back. Copy that, Marcus. Unit 47 is en route. I had to admire the performance. Marcus wasn't actually connected to dispatch, but his radio work was convincing enough to make my family exchange nervous glances. This is harassment, Michael said, but his voice had lost its edge. Whoever bought this property is clearly targeting us. I wouldn't know about that, sir. I just enforce property rights. That's when I decided to make my entrance. I walked down the hill slowly, carrying a manila envelope, dressed in jeans and a simple black t-shirt. I looked like I belonged there, which I did. I owned the place. Is there a problem here? I asked Marcus, as if I'd just happened upon the scene. These folks are trying to access the shoreline without authorization, ma'am. Michael turned toward me, and I watched his expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and something approaching horror. Charlotte? Hi, Michael, Mum, Savannah. I nodded politely to each of them. Beautiful day for the lake, isn't it? What are you doing here? Mum demanded. I own here. I handed the envelope to Michael. Deeds inside if you want to verify. Michael's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope. I watched his face as he read the property description, the sale price, the date of purchase. 3 days after Dad's funeral. You bought this place? 12 acres, private shoreline, exclusive boat access rights. I gestured toward the water. Everything you see from here to the point. This is impossible, Mum said. You don't have this kind of money. Apparently I do. Savannah was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. But you're a photographer. Michael said you barely make ends meet. Michael says a lot of things. I turned to him. Remember Thanksgiving 2018? You said I don't count because I'm never here. His face went pale. Charlotte, I never... You did. I have it recorded. I smiled. I have a lot of things recorded. The sheriff's deputy chose that moment to arrive, which was perfect timing since I'd actually called him myself an hour earlier to give him a heads up about the situation. Everything okay here? Deputy Rodriguez asked, stepping out of his patrol car. Just a property access issue, Marcus said. These folks were trying to use the boat ramp without permission. Rodriguez nodded. Mum, is this your property? He asked me. It is. I handed him a copy of the deed. He glanced at it, then looked at my family. I'm going to need you folks to move your vehicle. This is private property. But our cabin is right there, Mom protested, pointing across the water. That may be, ma'am, but you don't have access rights to this shoreline. You'll need to work that out with the property owner. Michael was still staring at the deed. $4.2 million. Where did you get $4 million? Same place you got the money for your Range Rover. I worked for it. This is insane, Savannah whispered. You bought an entire estate just to block us from the lake. I looked at her for a long moment. She seemed genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why anyone would go to such lengths. It was almost endearing. I didn't buy it to block you, I said finally. I bought it because I could. Then I turned to Marcus. Make sure they have my business card, in case they want to discuss access arrangements. As I walked back up the hill, I heard Michael calling after me. Charlotte, wait. We need to talk about this. But I didn't stop. I had photos to take. The gallery was packed by 7 p.m. I stood in the corner of the Meridian Gallery in Chelsea, watching people move through my exhibition like they were walking through someone's private diary, which, in a way, they were. Invisible Daughters covered 3 walls and included a live stream component that was broadcasting to galleries in Los Angeles, Chicago, and London simultaneously. Elisa had handled the technical setup while I'd spent the past 2 weeks selecting and arranging 27 photographs that told the story of a childhood spent being erased. This is brutal, a woman in her 50s whispered to her companion as they stopped in front of the centerpiece. Look at this little girl's face. The photograph showed me at 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with tears streaming down my cheeks. In the background, slightly out of focus, Michael was being praised for making honor roll. The audio caption, activated by a motion sensor, played Mum's voice. Charlotte, stop making everything about you. Your brother is trying to share good news. The audio is what makes it devastating, the woman continued. You can hear the dismissal in the mother's voice. A man in an expensive suit paused beside them. Is this real? These are actual family recordings. According to the artist's statement, yes, she documented her family interactions for over a decade. The woman pointed to a small placard. It says here she started recording conversations when she was 12, initially just to remember what was said during arguments. I watched him read the placard, his expression changing as he absorbed the details. The exhibition wasn't just photographs, it was evidence. Across the room, Lorelei Lynch was interviewing Elisa for her article. I'd researched Lorelei carefully before inviting her. Regional journalist, known for human interest stories that went viral, particularly pieces about family dysfunction and social media culture. So Charlotte documented all of this in real time? Lorelei asked, holding up her phone to record. She's been taking photographs since she was 8, Elisa said. But the audio recording started when she was 12. Initially for her own protection, to remember what was actually said versus what the family claimed was said later. And her family had no idea? None. Charlotte has always been invisible to them. They never noticed she was documenting their behaviour. I moved closer to eavesdrop on their conversation. This piece here, Lorelei gestured toward a photograph of last Christmas, shows her literally being pushed out of the family photo. You can see her mother's hand on her shoulder, moving her aside. That's from December 2022, Elisa said. Charlotte flew home for Christmas, and they took the annual family portrait without including her. When she asked why, her mother said, "You don't really live here anymore, dear." The audio for that piece was particularly damaging. You could hear Mum's voice, saccharine and dismissive. Family photos are for family members who are actually present in our lives, Charlotte. You visit twice a year. A young couple stopped in front of the funeral slideshow recreation. I'd recreated the entire 27-minute presentation from Dad's service, but with my photos inserted where they should have been. The contrast was stark. Jesus, the woman said. They really edited her out of her own father's funeral slideshow. Every single photo, her boyfriend replied, reading the description. 27 years of family history, and she appears in 0 slides. But look at these photos she took of him. They're beautiful. The photos I'd taken of Dad were scattered throughout the exhibition. Dad teaching me to use his old film camera. Dad at my high school graduation, beaming with pride while Mom looked bored. Dad in the hospital 2 weeks before he died, holding my hand and telling me I had a gift for seeing truth. That last photo had won the International Portrait Prize, but I'd never told the family. What was the point? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Charlotte, this is Savannah. We need to talk. This exhibition is destroying Michael's reputation. Please call me." I showed the text to Elisa, who was finally free from her interview with Lorelei. "His reputation?" she said. "What about your reputation? You've been dealing with this abuse for decades." "It's not abuse," I said automatically, then caught myself. "I mean, it's not physical abuse. Emotional neglect is abuse, Charlotte. Systematic exclusion is abuse. Gaslighting is abuse." A woman approached us, tears in her eyes. "Excuse me, are you the artist?" I nodded. "I just wanted to thank you. I grew up in a family like this. The invisible daughter. Seeing this..." She gestured around the room. "It makes me feel less alone." "That's why I made it," I said. After she walked away, Elisa pulled up something on her phone. Lorelei's article just went live. It's already being shared everywhere. The headline read, "You don't know the girl they cropped out. A daughter's devastating documentation of family erasure." The article was thorough and sympathetic, focusing on the systematic nature of the emotional neglect rather than sensationalizing the family drama. Lorelei had done her research, interviewing child psychologists about the long-term effects of being the invisible child in a family system. "Look at the comments," Elisa said, scrolling through her phone. "Hundreds of people sharing their own stories." My phone rang, Michael's name on the screen. "Don't answer it," Elisa said. But I did. "Charlotte, what the hell is this exhibition?" "People are calling my office, asking about the abusive brother from the art show." "It's documentation," I said calmly. "It's character assassination. You're destroying my career over some childhood grudge. I'm showing people what happened. Nothing more, nothing less. Take it down. No. Charlotte, I'm serious. This is affecting my business, my marriage, my reputation. Savannah is getting harassed on social media. I looked around the gallery, at all the people connecting with my story, finally seeing what I'd lived through. Good, I said, and hung up. Elisa grinned. How does it feel? Like I exist, I said. Michael showed up at my studio 3 days later. I was reviewing contact sheets when the buzzer rang. The doorman called up. Ms. Warren? There's a Michael here to see you. Says he's your brother. Send him up. I'd been expecting this visit since the exhibition opened. The article had gone viral, shared over 50,000 times in the first 48 hours. The comments section was brutal for Michael, with people calling him everything from golden child narcissist to emotional abuser. He looked terrible when I opened the door. Unshaven, wrinkled shirt, the kind of exhausted that comes from not sleeping for days. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the apartment. Come in, I said to his back. He stopped in the middle of my living room, staring at the walls covered with photographs. Most people found my apartment overwhelming. Every surface covered with images, contact sheets, proof prints, a visual diary of 15 years in New York. Jesus, Charlotte, how long have you been documenting everything? Since I was 8. Dad gave me my first camera, remember? I remember you taking pictures. I didn't know you were... He gestured vaguely at the walls. Building a case. I wasn't building anything. I was just recording my life. He turned to face me, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. My firm let me go yesterday. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because this exhibition is the reason. 3 major clients pulled their accounts after that article came out. They said they couldn't work with someone who systematically abused his sister. Did you systematically abuse me? Of course not. We're siblings. Siblings fight, they compete, they exclude each other from family photos. They mock each other's careers. They manipulate inheritance documents. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I walked to my desk and pulled out a small digital recorder. Thanksgiving 2018. You were in the kitchen with Uncle Scott, talking about Dad's will. I pressed play. Michael's voice filled the room, slightly distorted but clearly audible. The cabin should go to me anyway. Charlotte doesn't count. She's not even here half the time. Dad knows I'm the one who actually cares about family. Michael stared at the recorder like it was a weapon pointed at him. You recorded that? I recorded everything. Conversations, phone calls, family dinners. I started doing it when I was 12 because you all would gaslight me afterward. Tell me I was being dramatic, that things didn't happen the way I remembered. That's not... It's exactly what you did. Every time. I stopped the recording. This one's going in the next installation. I'm calling it Erased by Proximity. There's a next installation. The exhibition was just phase 1, Michael. I have 15 years of material. He sank into my couch, head in his hands. Savannah left me. When? Yesterday. After the article came out. She said she couldn't be married to someone who treated family like that. He looked up at me. She packed her bags and moved back to her parents' house. I'm sorry. No, you're not. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To destroy my life. I sat down across from him. I wanted to be seen. For once in my life, I wanted our family to acknowledge that I exist. You exist, of course you exist. Do I? When was the last time you asked about my work? My life? When was the last time you included me in anything without being forced to? He was quiet for a long moment. You never seemed interested in family stuff. I was never invited to family stuff. That's not true. I got up and pulled a photo album from the shelf. Christmas 2019. You had a party at your house. 30 people. I found out about it from Mum's Facebook post. I showed him the photo. The entire extended family gathered around his Christmas tree. Everyone except me. You were in New York? He said weakly. I was in Albany, visiting Dad in the hospital. I was 20 minutes away. I flipped to another photo. Easter 2020. Family brunch at Mum's house. Again, found out on social media. That was during COVID. We kept it small. 12 people, Michael. You kept it small by not inviting me. I kept flipping pages, showing him years of family gatherings, celebrations, milestones that had happened without me. Each photo was a small knife, evidence of systematic exclusion. I didn't realize, he said finally. You didn't want to realize. It was easier to pretend I didn't care than to admit you were leaving me out. My phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it. Charlotte, this is Mum. We need to discuss the situation immediately. You're embarrassing the entire family. I showed Michael the text. She wants to discuss the situation, not apologize for it. Discuss it. She's upset. We all are. Good. You should be upset. You should have been upset 20 years ago when you started treating me like I didn't matter. He stood up, pacing to the window. What do you want, Charlotte? Money? An apology? What will make you stop this? I want you to understand what you did to me. Fine, I understand. We excluded you. We took you for granted. We were shitty siblings and parents. There. Is that what you want to hear? I want you to feel it. Feel what? What it's like to be erased, to have people you love act like you don't exist, to watch your family celebrate everything without you. I joined him at the window. You're getting a taste of it now. How does it feel? He was quiet for a long time, staring down at the street. It feels terrible. Now imagine feeling that way for 30 years. Okay. I get it. But this exhibition, the article, it's destroying more than just me. Mum's getting hate mail. Uncle Scott's business is being affected. You're hurting innocent people. Innocent people? I laughed. Michael, there are no innocent people in this story. You all participated. You all chose to exclude me, dismiss me, erase me from family history. So what's the end game here? You destroy all of us, and then what? I turned away from the window. Then maybe you'll remember I exist. He left without saying goodbye, which seemed appropriate. He'd been leaving me behind his whole life. After he was gone, I called Elisa. How did it go? She asked. He still doesn't get it. He thinks this is about revenge. Isn't it? I looked around my apartment, at all the photographs documenting a lifetime of being invisible. It's about being seen, I said. Finally. The envelope arrived at my studio with no return address. I almost threw it away. Unmarked mail usually meant either bills or crazy fan letters from the exhibition. But something about the handwriting made me pause. Shaky, elderly script that looked familiar. Inside was a single document. Dad's will. But not the version that had been read at the funeral. This one was unsigned, with handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. Charlotte gets the cabin, was written in Dad's handwriting next to the property distribution section. Below that, in different ink, she sees what it really is. My hands were shaking as I called Stuart. I need you to look at something, I said. Can you meet me at your office? An hour later, Stuart was examining the document under a magnifying glass while I paced his office. This is definitely your father's handwriting, he said, and this is definitely an earlier version of the will. See the date? This was drafted 3 weeks before the version that was probated. So Dad originally left me the cabin? According to this, yes, but this version was never signed or notarized. He pointed to the signature line. Someone would have had to access this document and create a new version? Who had access to Dad's safe? Family members, presumably. Anyone who knew the combination. I thought about the timeline. Dad had died on a Tuesday. I'd flown in from a photography exhibition in Portland, arriving Wednesday morning. The funeral was Friday. Plenty of time for someone to access the safe and make changes. Can we prove document tampering? Stuart shook his head. Not without the original signed version, and not without proof of who made the changes. This unsigned draft doesn't have legal standing. I stared at the handwritten note. She sees what it really is. What did he mean by that? I asked. I have no idea. But someone wanted you to see this document. someone who had access to it. That evening, I called the one person who might have answers. "Aunt Helen, it's Charlotte." "Oh, honey, I've been following the news about your exhibition. I'm so proud of you for finally speaking up." Aunt Helen was Dad's sister, the only family member who'd ever treated me like I mattered. She lived in Florida now, but she'd been close to Dad before he died. "Helen, I need to ask you something. Did Dad ever talk to you about his will?" "Oh, sweetheart, I was wondering when someone would ask me about that." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Your father called me 2 weeks before he died. He was upset about something. Said he'd discovered Michael and your mother had been going through his papers, pressuring him to change his will." "Pressuring him how?" "They told him you didn't care about the family cabin, that you'd just sell it and move on. They convinced him it would be wasted on you." I sank into my chair. "So he changed it?" "He signed a new version, yes, but he regretted it immediately. He called me the day before he died, crying. Said he'd made a terrible mistake, that you were the only one who really understood what the cabin meant." "What did it mean?" "It was where he taught you photography, honey. All those summers when you were little, before Michael got too cool to visit. Your father said you saw the beauty in that place, the peace. He said Michael just saw dollar signs." I remembered those summers, Dad and me on the dock at sunrise, him showing me how to capture the light on the water, teaching me about composition, patience, the art of waiting for the perfect moment. "Helen, who sent me the unsigned will?" "I did, sweetheart. I found it in your father's desk when I helped clean out his study." "Your mother and Michael had already gone through everything, but they missed the bottom drawer. It was stuck. Why didn't you say something at the time?" "What could I say? The legal will was already signed and notarized, but I thought you should know what your father really wanted." After I hung up, I sat in my studio holding the unsigned will. Dad had wanted me to have the cabin, not because of its value, but because I understood what it represented. All those quiet mornings, just the two of us and our cameras. But Michael and Mom had manipulated him into changing his mind. They'd convinced a dying man that his daughter didn't care about family legacy. I could expose this, add it to the exhibition, show the world how they'd manipulated a grieving, sick old man to get what they wanted. Instead, I walked to my fireplace and struck a match. The unsigned will caught fire quickly, Dad's handwriting disappearing in the flames. "She sees what it really is," burned away last. Elisa found me there an hour later, staring at the ashes. "What did you burn?" she asked. "Evidence?" "Evidence of what?" "That they're even worse than I thought." I turned away from the fireplace. Dad originally left me the cabin. They talked him out of it while he was dying. "Charlotte, that's huge. We could what? Sue them? Drag a dead man's reputation through the mud? Prove that they manipulated a cancer patient?" "Yes." "Exactly that." I shook my head. "This isn't about the cabin anymore, Elisa. It never really was." "Then what's it about?" I looked around my studio, at all the photographs documenting years of exclusion and dismissal, at the evidence of a lifetime spent being invisible. It's about showing them who I really am, what I'm capable of, what they lost when they decided I didn't matter. And burning the will accomplishes that how? Because now they'll never know that I know. They'll never know that I chose not to destroy them completely. I smiled. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show mercy to people who don't deserve it. Elisa stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're letting them get away with it." "No," I said, walking to my desk where plans for the summer exhibition were spread out. "I'm showing them what real power looks like." The plans showed the layout for my lakefront estate. Guest houses, photography workshops, an artist residency program, a place where invisible daughters could come to be seen. "They gave Michael a cabin," I said. "I'm building a legacy." The drone light show started at sunset. I stood on the deck of my newly constructed main house, watching 300 illuminated drones form patterns over the lake. First my company logo, then shifting geometric shapes that reflected off the water like liquid starlight. "This is incredible," Zane said, joining me at the railing. He'd flown in from Silicon Valley for the weekend, along with 40 other photographers, influencers, and media executives I'd invited to the inaugural Warren Studio Estates retreat. "Wait until you see the finale," I said. Across the lake, barely visible in the growing darkness, sat my family's cabin. No lights in the windows, no activity on the dock. They'd stopped coming after Memorial Day weekend once they realized their lake access was permanently blocked. "Charlotte, the setup inside is perfect," Elisa called from the sliding door. "Everyone's ready for your presentation." The main house had been designed specifically for events like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, a presentation space that could hold 50 people, guest suites for visiting artists. Everything the family cabin wasn't. I walked inside to find the room buzzing with conversation. Tech entrepreneurs, fashion photographers, documentary filmmakers, social media strategists, the kind of people who understood the power of authentic storytelling. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, and the room quieted. "Welcome to Warren Studio Estates." Applause filled the space. I waited for it to die down before continuing. 6 months ago, I was the invisible daughter. The family disappointment who chose art over stability, New York over hometown loyalty, the one who didn't count. I clicked a remote, and the wall screen displayed the first photo from my Invisible Daughters exhibition. Me at 9, crying while Michael was praised in the background. Tonight, I want to talk about visibility, about what happens when the people who dismissed you realize what you've actually built. The presentation moved through my journey chronologically. The early years of struggle, eating ramen and shooting weddings to pay rent, the breakthrough clients who saw something different in my work, the gradual building of a business empire that nobody in my family knew existed. The cabin inheritance was the final insult, I said, showing a photo of the family at Dad's funeral. But it was also the catalyst. Sometimes you need to be pushed completely out to realize you were never really in. The screen shifted to architectural plans of the estate. Guest houses, workshop spaces, an artist residency program for emerging photographers from underrepresented backgrounds. Warren Studio Estates isn't just a retreat center, it's a statement, a place where invisible daughters can come to be seen. A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What's your family's reaction been to all this?" I smiled. "Let me show you." I clicked to a new slide, a screenshot of Mum's Facebook page from that morning. The post was a rant about ungrateful children and family loyalty, shared with increasingly desperate frequency as her friend list dwindled. My mother has lost 60% of her social media followers since the exhibition opened. My brother's investment firm collapsed after 3 major clients pulled their accounts. My uncle's construction business is struggling because people associate the family name with emotional abuse. "Do you feel guilty about that?" someone called out. "I feel powerful," I said. "For the first time in my life, my actions have consequences for them. They can't dismiss me anymore because I'm not asking for their approval. I'm showing them what they lost." The presentation continued with testimonials from other invisible daughters who'd reached out after the exhibition. Women who'd been overlooked, underestimated, erased from their own family narratives. "This is bigger than my personal story," I said. "This is about systemic family dynamics that favor certain children over others, about the long-term damage of emotional neglect, about what happens when the dismissed child grows up and finds her voice." As I spoke, I could see my family's cabin through the windows. Dark, abandoned, irrelevant. They'd put it on the market last month, but who wants a lakefront property with no lake access? "The final piece of tonight's presentation," I said, "is something I call Legacy on Fire." The lights dimmed, and the screen showed a montage of family photos spanning 3 decades. But these weren't the sanitized versions from Christmas cards. These were the real moments, the exclusions, the dismissals, the systematic erasure of a daughter who inconveniently refused to disappear. The final image was a photo I'd taken that morning, the view from my deck, looking across the lake toward the family cabin. The caption read, "This was never about the house. It was about who was allowed inside." As the presentation ended, Dad's voice played from hidden speakers around the room. It was from a recording I'd made during one of our last conversations, when he was teaching me about light and shadow. Photography isn't about capturing what's there, Charlotte. It's about revealing what's been hidden. You have a gift for seeing truth, even when people try to hide it from you. Someday, you'll show them something real. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, and soon everyone was on their feet. Questions? I asked. A man near the back raised his hand. What's next? Where do you go from here? I looked out at the lake, at the lights of my estate reflecting on the water, at the dark cabin across the way where my family used to gather without me. I keep building, I said. I keep showing invisible daughters that they matter. I keep proving that the people who dismiss you don't get to define your worth. And your family? They'll watch from across the water. They'll see what they could have been part of, if they'd chosen differently. I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Very, very well. The applause started again, but I was already thinking about tomorrow's workshop schedule, next month's artist residency applications, the documentary crew coming to film next week. They'd called me invisible for so long. Now they couldn't look away. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in November. I was reviewing applications for the Spring Artist Residency program when Elisa walked into my studio office, carrying a manila envelope. This came to your New York address, she said, forwarded from the gallery. The return address made my stomach tighten. Kennedy Warren Rogers. Mum had hyphenated her name after the divorce, trying to distance herself from the Warren family scandal. Want me to open it? Elisa asked. No. I've got it. Inside was a handwritten letter on cream-coloured stationery, the kind Mum used for thank you notes and formal invitations. Her perfect cursive filled 2 pages. Charlotte, it began, I'm writing to ask you to consider taking down the exhibition. It's been 8 months, and the damage to our family has been severe. Michael has moved to Portland and won't speak to any of us. Your Uncle Scott's business failed. I've had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. I kept reading. The letter detailed the family's complete social collapse, friends who no longer returned calls, invitations that stopped coming, the humiliation of being recognised in public as that family from the art exhibition. I know you're angry, the letter continued. I know we weren't perfect parents, but this public humiliation has gone too far. You've made your point. Please, I'm begging you to end this. At the bottom of the page was a phone number and a final line. I'm ready to listen now. I set the letter aside and pulled out a photograph from my desk drawer. It was from Christmas 2019, the last time I'd tried to come home. I was sitting at the kids' table while the adults discussed family business without me. In the background, barely visible, Mum was removing my place setting to make room for Savannah's purse. I'd titled that photo, Making Room. What does it say? Elisa asked. She wants me to take down the exhibition, says she's ready to listen. Are you going to call her? I looked out the window at the Manhattan street below, people rushing to meetings, chasing deadlines, building lives that mattered to them, all of them visible in their own stories. No, I said, but I'm going to send her something. I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out a contact sheet from my archive. It showed a sequence of photos from my 8th birthday party. In the first frame, I was blowing out candles while the family sang. By the final frame, everyone had moved away to talk among themselves, leaving me alone at the table with my cake. I'd never shown this sequence to anyone. It was too raw, too perfectly symbolic of my entire childhood. I slipped the contact sheet into an envelope, along with a single sentence written on my business card. This is who I was before I became invisible. You're not going to respond to her letter? Elisa asked. I just did. The next morning, I drove up to the lake estate. The November air was crisp, the trees bare, the water still as glass. Perfect conditions for the kind of photography that had made my reputation. I parked at the bench, overlooking the water, and pulled out Dad's old film camera, the same one he'd given me when I was 8, the one that started everything. Across the lake, The family cabin sat empty. A sold sign had appeared on the dock sometime in the past week. New owners would move in soon, people who had no idea about the Warren family drama that had played out on these shores. I loaded a roll of black and white film and started shooting. The morning light on the water, the abandoned dock, the way shadows fell across the empty cabin windows. Through the viewfinder, I saw movement. A car pulling into the cabin's driveway, a woman getting out, looking around uncertainly. It was Mom. She stood by her car for a long moment, staring across the water toward my estate. Even from this distance, I could see her shoulders shaking. She was crying. I lowered the camera and watched her walk to the end of the dock. She sat down heavily, her feet dangling in the water, and pulled something from her purse. My contact sheet. She was holding the photos of my 8th birthday. For 30 minutes, she sat there studying those images. Then she stood up, walked back to her car, and drove away. I never heard from her again. That afternoon, I called the gallery. "I want to add one final piece to the exhibition," I told the curator. "What kind of piece?" I looked at Dad's camera in my hands, then at the lake, where he'd taught me to see light and shadow, truth and beauty. A self-portrait. Me at the lake, holding my father's camera. I want to call it Visible. What's the story behind it? I thought about the little girl who'd been cropped out of family photos, dismissed at dinner tables, erased from funeral slideshows. I thought about the woman who'd built an empire in silence, who'd bought a lake to prove a point, who'd shown the world what emotional neglect looked like. It's about a daughter who refused to disappear, I said, even when her family wished she would. The exhibition would run indefinitely. The estate would continue hosting retreats for invisible daughters. The Warren family name would forever be associated with the consequences of emotional neglect. And I would keep taking pictures, keep telling stories, keep proving that the people who try to erase you don't get to write your ending. They'd called me invisible for so long, but now, when people heard the name Charlotte Warren, they saw exactly who I was, and I was never going to be invisible again.